Domesticated rabbits descend from European wild rabbits. European wild rabbits live in groups depending on the resources available. The more resources that are available, the less tightly they will group, and actually prefer quite a bit of distance from the other rabbits. A literature review concluded that wild rabbits are either dominant or subordinate, and the subordinate animals live in a constant state of stress and fear when in a group setting. Dominant animals require submission from subordinates daily. If the subordinate does not perform the submission, this will lead to violent fighting. Domesticated rabbits allowed to live in colonies showed much aggression to each other, and the reviewers came to the conclusion that rabbits are very aggressively territorial animals and for their safety should be housed individually. The social nature of European rabbits, this was a study. So I'm going to read the excerpt from the study in a second, but the only caveat I'm going to say, talking to people who have done colonies correctly, which a house rabbit cannot do because you simply do not have enough space in order to do this correctly. Individual rabbits need an absolute minimum of 50 square feet per rabbit in order to be kept in a colony setting. I believe the one person that we reference, she says if it's a buck and does, the buck can get away with 25 square feet to himself. But each doe needs at least 50 because rabbits, in particular the does, are aggressively territorial. And to be honest, they really should have closer to 100 square foot per rabbit. So if you're going to have multiple rabbits, you need to have a pretty large space in order for them to take a territory. And that's just the minimum requirement for a colony, because we've dealt with other territorial rabbits like Blackstrapped, who was one of mine, who was extremely cage aggressive in any cage smaller than a 5x2. So she needed minimum 10 square feet to herself, or she would be a pain in the ass. And they noticed with her, when she was brought inside for a bit, when they were dealing with one of her litters because she wasn't the best mom, they gave her an entire bedroom. And it went from her dealing with her, 10 square feet to she then took over the entire bedroom. And if they had given her more access to the house, she would have eventually decided the entire house was her territory. And what she would do with her aggression is she didn't care if you were human or rabbit or whatever, she'd go for your toes. So minimum space if you're going to be free roaming like that, because they are aggressive. And this isn't me saying, well, they have to have that much room to play. And this is not playing that they are doing. This is how much space that they think they need, or they will attack the other rabbit. So it's a minimum of 50 to 80 or 50 to 100 square feet. So a 10 by 10 area just for that individual rabbit, if that rabbit assumes that is its territory. Now, if that rabbit it does not like any other rabbits, that still does not stop it from attacking and possibly mutilating any other rabbit in what it will consider its own territory. So then, like was said earlier, and even then, even people that have colonies, if you ask them how they do it, they'll throw them in together in a large enough space, and then they just walk away because they know that there's going to be fights. And everyone that's had it has had at least one death, or they've had a maiming, or they've had ears bitten off, or castrations or partial castrations, because it is going to happen. And a lot of times these people that have established colonies, they have established colonies that work only because they've been culling for temperament. So any rabbit that has shown overly territorial or aggressive behavior, they have culled it out. The problem with pets is pets are typically animals that have come from people that are not breeding to any type of standard, are not culling for temperament, are giving you their problem children, and are not, removing those bad traits. So you're at a higher likelihood of getting an aggressive rabbit, getting a sick rabbit, getting a rabbit that's going to have problems, which is different than someone that's done a long-term colony setting where they have specifically bred them to be able to handle a colony setting and have maintained enough space. All right. So back to the social nature of the European rabbits. This is an excerpt. However, anecdotal reports of aggression in rabbits, often without an obvious cause and resulting in serious injuries during socialization attempts in the laboratory, have prevented widespread social housing of the species. The literature on the subject is relatively brief, considering the number of animals used in research facilities each year, and many of the published reports are subjective assessments rather than well-controlled studies that provide conclusive evidence regarding social housing benefits, risks, and methods for the species. In such groupings, the dominant buck routinely patrols a territory, and as often as daily requires a submissive act from all other rabbits, both male and female, sharing the same space. These submissive acts are manifested by the subordinate animals retreating or fleeing from the dominant buck's advances. Retreating is required to demonstrate submission, and any failure to retreat prompts an attack. All it takes is one missed social cue. In contrast, all adult animals demonstrated aggressive behavior towards one another, with no difference in frequency of aggressive behavior patterns between males and females in a large fenced-in area. And this was from Domino, actually, was the one who went ahead and double researched this. And she quoted this from The Social Nature of European Rabbits. And so, we've mentioned in here previously, rabbits live in warrens, but you do not have this space like a wild rabbit does to avoid someone else. Colony setups recommend 50 square feet per doe of unbroken space. In real life, people trying to bond their rabbits are trying to do a colony setup without the sufficient space to do so safely. Some rabbits aren't even interested in breeding until 1 year old. Circling is territorial. And that came from actually that's a quote from Kavlupis, another one of our partners. And then, like I said, more or less, you need to keep approximately 50 feet apart. So in nature, if you actually watch wild rabbits in nature, even the cottontails we have in the U.S., you typically do not see them closer than 50 to 80 feet apart. They may be able to see each other line of sight, but they prefer to stay distanced from each other, except for breeding. And oftentimes when you do see them in the wild, they're fighting. And oftentimes when the few times they come out of their burrows, they're crepusculars. They'll come out very early morning and very, very late in the afternoon, evening to eat, and then they go back in and they hide. So you got to really understand how rabbits think socially. They are very introverted animals. So no, rabbits typically are not that type of social. They're typically very territorial, and they use a fear-based social hierarchy structure where there is a dominant, typically buck, over the rest of the warren. There's another excellent book. I want to say it is the Private Life of Rabbits or Secret Life of Rabbits. It was the 5-year-long study that Watership Down's author actually based his book on. He actually went and talked to the research scientists that did this very interesting Private Life of Rabbits study and documentation. And that's why Watership Down is actually very accurate to rabbit social structure and how absolutely aggressive wild European rabbits are, and our domesticated rabbits, which all are descended from that initial that initial behavior pattern.